Hello, friends. My name is Mark. I am the author of the book Early Genesis, The Revealed Cosmology. I believe there is a link to its Amazon page in the description section of the video. It's available for no charge for those of you with access to Kindle Unlimited. Creation, evolution wars. When I say that, most people know exactly what I mean, just when I say it. I'm going to make the case, though, that it's a fake battle. Not completely, but in large part. The real battle is between naturalism and creationism, and evolution is the battleground in that battle. Now, let's get a couple of terms first so we won't talk past one another. Naturalism is this idea that nature is all there is and all there needs to be to explain everything we see. We don't need any outside interference from space, time, matter, and energy. In the laws that we have, wherever they came from, they can explain everything that's ever happened. Creationism says, no, that's not right. While there are laws and they're God-given, from time to time, God intervenes in the material universe. And so it's not all just nature and matter and energy and time and space bouncing up against one another in accordance with certain laws. And there's a third position, deism. It's the idea that, yes, God did create the universe and set up the laws. But once he did that, he quit intervening. He did not intervene. He set up all the dominoes. He knocked over that first domino. And since that time, he's just been watching them fall. And obviously, the incarnation and the atonement for our sins, reconciling God and man, that is an intervention in the natural universe. So that is an example where it wouldn't be deistic, it'd be theistic, it would be, in a sense, creationism, because God created a unity of himself and humanity. But we see that just wasn't the only time. Several times in the text, we see God's intervention. The Bible, Old Testament, is almost a record of God's intervention in mankind. Now, when I say this, some people say, oh, God of the gaps. You think there's creation, natural laws, but then he's intervening, so he jumps in these gaps between what you can explain, blah, blah, blah. And I say that sounding dismissively because I kind of am. It's a rhetorical trick. It's not even a serious argument. We are not saying that God was stumbling around and found a universe somewhere that had a bunch of laws in it set up already and decided to start intervening in that universe. He made the universe and the laws too. He made it all. He's God of the gaps and he's God of everything outside the gaps. We're not saying he's just in the gaps. So why do you keep going God of the gaps? It's silly. But naturalism is indefensible. And that's why they have the idea that this universe pulled itself up by its own bootstraps, it doesn't need any outside help. That's not something you can defend scientifically. And so they very cleverly, naturalists have very cleverly shifted the argument and said, oh, well, evolution. Let's make this about evolution versus creation and not naturalism versus creationism. That's the real battle, one ism versus another. Evolution is the battleground because let's look at it. Almost all Christians believe that some evolution occurred. A lot of Christians believe pretty much everything evolved. Even many young earth creationists think that the animals came off Noah's Ark and they very rapidly diversified after that. So creationism is not the opposite of evolution. Naturalism is the opposite of creationism. Now, I say that, but I want to go even further into it. Let's look at a good definition of evolution. Descent with modification is one of the primary definitions of evolution. Okay? And so I want us to do a thought experiment. Because natural breeders, they take traits that show up from nature and they selectively breed for those traits, and they get an outcome that nature by herself may never have produced. Is that evolution? It was descent with modification. But the impetus for the modification was in the intelligent intervention of human beings. So it was also intelligent design too, was it not? And in a sense, it would be soft touch creationism, because the intelligent designers said, I want the dog to have floppy ears, the wolf to have floppy ears, or whatever trait they were selecting for, and they got it. They didn't get it by messing with the genomes, but they still got it by their intent, by their actions. Now let's go further. Instead of farmers or animal breeders being the selectors, suppose God himself decided to be the selector, leveraging his divine knowledge. He would know if he wanted to produce a new trait, a more advanced trait. If there was one population over here that had a rare mutation that combined with a second population far away could produce a genetic suite that combined with yet another rare mutation that would briefly show up 4 generations from then, all that could produce a new trait, new capability, new structure. He would know that, and he could make that happen. In other words, our natural breeders can change organisms far faster than nature can through natural selection, through artificial selection, and God would be much better at it than we are. So, is that evolution? Yeah, it's descent through modification. Is that intelligent design? Yes. Is that creationism? That's soft touch creationism anyway. So let's go one step further. Suppose, just like our engineers, they do things like they take jellyfish genes and stick them in mice, and they get mice that glow. Is that, and then those mice have babies. Is that descent modification with descent, or descent with modification? Yes, it is. So that's evolution. It meets the definition. See, when they make that definition, they assume naturalism. All we do is we just don't assume naturalism. It's the same definition, though, without the assumption, the unwarranted assumption. Is what these genetic engineers do. Is that intelligent design? Yes. Is it creationism? Yeah. They created something new, something that nature herself could not. So, what if God is a genetic engineer? And of course, he wouldn't need test tubes or lab coats. He could send information in through the quantum realm, make one molecule protein fold this way instead of that, cause a mutation to go this way when 999.999% of the time it would go some other way. He could do that. May have done that. We don't know. Now you get to Genesis chapter 2, of course, you get a situation that looks a lot more like old school creationism. But the Christ-centered model sort of just explains all that. Chapter 1 is the account of all of creation from the beginning of time to the atonement. Yes, Genesis 1 is both history and prophecy. It's in the book. Genesis chapter 2 is a much smaller work within the larger work of creation. And its purpose is to initiate the plan to redeem that creation and reconcile it with its creator. And what may or may not have happened there can be different than what happened in the larger creation. And I don't say that everything in the larger creation evolved either. But the text is more complicated than either side in this war want to make it out to be. For example, the plants on day 3. God doesn't do anything except speak and tell the earth to bring forth the various kinds of plants. And then the earth does it. As far as we know, still doing it. Never told him to stop. So that sounds a lot like theistic evolution. With the creation of the animals, though, in the waters and the seas, it's a spectrum. He commands them to bring it forth, the animals, and they do so, but not without his help. He has to help too. And then there comes, of course, is man, and he may have used earth, but he did the job himself, according to the text. So there is a spectrum there. The gap between the positions is not so large as strict naturalists would make it out to be. And if someone suggested what I proposed about even though it's meets the definition of evolution, it's also God intervening throughout the process and shaping things the way he desired. Naturalists would hate it is just as much as they hate creationism, where God formed every animal out of clay and every species was its own separate creation. They would hate it just as much because they're naturalists. Their objection, their belief is not really in evolution. Their belief is that nature is all that's necessary to explain what is. And when you say, no, you can't, that's nothing you can prove scientifically. We can't go find, at this point in our technology, find a billion Earth-like planets and go put a single cell organism on each one and see if how many of them would develop anything like the complexity and diversity of life we see on Earth. Or if it'd just be a billion years later, there'd still be a bunch of single-celled organisms. We can't test that. So whatever belief someone holds about that, it's not a scientific belief. It's based on their underlying assumptions about reality that are beyond science, like whether or not God intervened in the creation. So Creation Evolution Wars, it is a chapter in this book, and I say a little more about it there, and as well as so many other things. But the main thing I point to is how the work of Christ is in the text from the beginning. And that's kind of the focus. But I do take a little time out to say this Creation Evolution War, to some extent, it is a false war. But there is a war, and it is between us and creationists. And it's one that one I think is worth fighting. At any rate, I do thank you for listening. I do hope that you consider purchasing or reading the book, and may God bless you.